Let's talk about the ballot initiative process for a minute, not in Washington state, but right here in Oregon. Here's my opinion on this. They're good. They work most of the time because they give voters a direct or even an indirect voice. Initiatives are a big reason Measure 110 got reformed and that historic campaign finance reform passed this year's legislative session. It was the same thing. I'll get to that more in a moment. But sometimes, though, initiatives invite cowardice, in my opinion. They allow politicians to duck hard votes. I think that happens when the legislature refers a question directly to voters. Other times, voters with initiatives ram through popular reforms that the legislative class is against, which I think is what we saw with Measure 5. Remember that? Way back in 1990 when I first got here, it passed and it limits the amount of property tax Oregon government can collect. It's also the reason the value of homes can only go up 3% a year for tax purposes. And Measure 113, that punishes lawmakers for boycotting the legislature. It was challenged in court, but the measure did hold up. But other times it allows groups to push through experiments like Measure 110 and decriminalize drugs, which did not work out so well. I spent a bit of time researching initiatives today, and Ballotopedia tells me this man is most responsible for them in Oregon. His name is William Simon Uren. He moved to Oregon in 1889 at the age of 30. He'd been a miner, a blacksmith, a newspaper editor, a lawyer, and a Republican worker by the time he arrived here. He got sick 3 years later and was nursed back to health by a family intent on government reform. They were the Llewellyngs. They helped him see that government needed more tools to work better, which is when he took up the cause for 3 tools: the initiative, the referendum, and the recall. In 1909, lawmakers approved the initiative for the very first time. It let citizens vote on amendments to the state constitution as well as enact new state laws. And it took off like wildfire. There were 400 state initiatives between 1904 and 2022. They included a 1912 vote that gave women the right to vote in Oregon, which brings us to today. In my opinion, the 2 threatened initiatives in Oregon are the key reason that Measure 110 was reformed and campaign finance got through too. In the first, a group threatened to take Measure 110 directly to the voters to see whether they wanted to throw it out completely. And you know what? Polling showed there was a really good chance the answer was going to be, oh yeah. That legitimate threat gave Democratic lawmakers the political cover they needed to take action. They could honestly tell the howling advocates who insisted that no one touch decriminalization that it would be better for lawmakers to craft a reasonable change than an initiative that could just blow the whole thing up. And so a bill passed that both parties can live with. And just as importantly, the folks behind the initiative say if it's signed by the governor, they're going to stand down. The very same thing happened with campaign finance reform. Good government groups already had an initiative they were going to put in front of voters, and they already had 100,000 signatures to show they were real serious. And I'm sure polling again showed that it would pass. So everyone involved was motivated to create something that lawmakers could pass, something reasonable as opposed to a sweeping initiative. I think that's the best and highest use of the initiative in Oregon. It shows the power of you, the voter. It shows lawmakers that they should work hard to hammer out compromises that work for all sides instead of just special interest groups. And I know not all of them are home runs. The gun control initiative called Measure 114 is still tied up in the courts, but that was going to be a thorny issue no matter what. Overall, I think Oregon's system of letting citizens put an idea up for a vote, it's a good one. It gives citizens a voice, sometimes direct, sometimes indirect. It's been in place for 122 years now, and just as needed today as it was way back when Mr. Uren pushed it through the Oregon legislature.